556 NATO 223. Beyond the XM193, beyond the M855. Because last I checked, I didn't sign the Hague Convention of '88, and I don't reckon you did either. These that are often so popular may not be optimal for you in your role and what you're trying to do, whether that be personal protection, defense, home defense, or hunting. So how can we optimize this perhaps suboptimal caliber? That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. Saddle up for another episode. On the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, use of force, the right way, with God Almighty at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am very humbled that God has allowed me to do many things in life relating to firearms. Been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. Military, infantry grunt in 2 branches of the armed forces. Also was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Law enforcement, L.A.P.D, worked regular assignments, also worked some more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I don't like to specify. State rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different places, competition shooting. Also been a professional big game hunter and guide, and hunted since I was a boy all over this beautiful country. Just to establish some street cred for this episode, I've been around the 556, I've been around the 223 quite a while. I've also been around the XM193 and the M855 for quite a while. So I know kind of what they can do and their limitations. Now, the military uses full metal jacket. I guess I should back up. The XM193 is commonly referred to as 55 grain. There's more to it than that, but the general 55 grain full metal jacket, a lot of times, even if it's not, it's called 193 or XM193. And the green tip, whether it is or not, referred to as green tip light armor piercing, M855 or M855A1. Those are common names for that genre of ammunition. Both are full metal jacket. The light armor piercing is a bit heavier at 62 grains with a tungsten core. Both, if they're loaded to their military guys, should have either staked and or sealant in the primers. Anyway, a lot of people, I think a lot of civilians think, oh, the military uses these rounds, they must be great. Well, let me tell you from firsthand experience, not everything the military uses is so great. A lot of their stuff, I think most of their stuff, is made to the cheapest bidder. The military deals in stuff in millions of rounds. They're maybe not necessarily as concerned with what's most effective round per round as maybe what's easy to produce, what's attainable, what's available to get produced in mass quantity, millions of rounds year after year. What's good on things like light armored vehicles. Also, what's perceived as acceptable by the Hague Convention, which, as I understand it, we didn't sign, but we still kind of, since we're using NATO stuff and NATO kind of abides by that, we kind of get roped into that in a roundabout way. None of those things, or some of those things, may or may not apply to you. So, does it really make sense to use those rounds? They're not known for being super accurate, especially the M855. Do your own research on that, but it has never been known as a highly accurate round. So no matter how accurate the AR platform might be, or your Daniel Defense or your Colt 6920, no matter how accurate that rifle may be, if you put 3 MOA ammo in it, it's a 3 MOA gun. It's nothing to write home about. That M855, it'll be different out of different guns, but it's not a highly accurate round. Also, never really been known for good ballistics performance, I don't think. And going back to the xm193, the 55 grain, this is in general the cheapest ammo you can get, like the 55 grain full metal jacket, which has its own benefit. What is that quote? Quantity has a quality all its own. This is a decent round. It can be fairly accurate. I think more accurate just because it's a simple cup and core bullet. It's just, you don't have to know what that means, but it's a simpler design. It's got fewer components, which means in general, it's going to be simpler to be consistent round after round. So it tends to be a more accurate round, the 55 grain. It's also higher velocity, which has some advantage, but it's still a full metal jacket. People will say, well, it tumbles. It may tumble, it may not. But one of the good things about it is it's cheap. It is 55 grain, and that's probably the most common, or one of the most common grain weights. So with that being said, let's start there. What can we do better than the XM193? Well, if you don't need full metal jacket, if you're not required to have it, maybe do what I would advise you to do on your handgun. Find a better ballistic round to your practice ammo that shoots the same point of aim, point of impact, and that's likely going to be another 55 grain. There are many good 55 grain loads that do ballistically better. One is the Spear Gold Dot. Got quite a bit of experience with this round. It is a great round, the Spear Gold Dot 55 grain. And I think if you are looking at this from a law enforcement perspective, from a, let's say, truck gun or a home defense gun or perimeter security, whatever you want to call it, that kind of round, not that one specifically, but that soft point meant to expand on impact has a lot of advantages. That's a good street proven round, that 55 grain Spear Gold Dot. It's not the only one, but I think it's probably your best all-around solution. It's one that I usually go to, not that round specifically, but having a 55 grain, let's say American Eagle, pretty easily attainable round, that 55 grain practice round, and then having a more ballistically capable round for my go-to defensive ammo, my go-to varmint hunting ammo, like let's say coyotes on a ranch or whatever the case might be, a more ballistically capable round. A couple come to mind, that Spear Gold Dot. There is also the Federal True Tactical Rifle Urban. It's a good round if you can find it. Also, if you were, let's say your main range fodder was the 55 grain and the Winchester, there's also a couple of Winchester loads more optimal. There's the Super X soft point and there's the Super X jacketed hollow point. Now, this is not the same as a handgun. Don't assume that hollow point is always what you want. You're going at much greater velocities. Let's just say, for argument's sake, rough numbers, 55 grain out of a 20-inch barrel is cooking at 3,200 plus feet a second. Your average 9mm is going maybe 9 to 11 to 1,200 feet a second. You're talking rough numbers, maybe 3 times the velocity, right? So you're dealing with way different physics. You may actually find, and you will find a lot of the good defensive ammo in the 223 will be soft point. There'll be some hollow point, but don't assume because it's a soft point, it's inferior to a hollow point. You really got to do your due diligence on that. But they offer both. They offer a hollow point and a soft point. So it's no guarantee that a 55 grain Winchester Super X is going to shoot the same place as a 55 grain full metal jacket Winchester, but it's not a bad place to start and verify. Frontier, which I think is a smaller subsidiary of Hornady, they make a 55 grain full metal jacket that does actually pretty well. Got some experience with that round as well. It's affordable enough that you might even want to practice with it, but they make a 55 grain Frontier full metal jacket and hollow point, and there's not that much difference in price. You may just decide you want to practice and keep your mag stocked up with that. There is also a Hornady custom load. So if you're looking for like really good accuracy in a 55 grain load, it depends on your gun and what your gun likes, but in my experience, Hornady custom loads are very accurate for a factory load. And these aren't the only games in town, but I would say pretty much any of those are going to do better than your XM193 for terminal performance. Now, your 62 grain, if you decide you want a little bit heavier bullet, it's nowhere near as common as far as different loads, I don't think, go as the 55 grain is, but it is fairly common as far as grain weights go. So if you decide you want to go the 62 grain because you prefer a little bit heavier bullet, there are some advantages, and I wouldn't say there's no time where I wouldn't want green tip light armor piercing as a civilian, right? If it's my truck gun, it still wouldn't be my go-to load in my gun, but there's a real possibility if it's my truck gun that I may have to shoot through my vehicle or through somebody else's vehicle or disable a vehicle. For that niche application, that green tip is kind of what it was made for. You know, if I'm trying to stop a vehicle ramming, forego a little bit of accuracy for a little bit better penetration. So you may decide for that reason you want a magazine of green tip, in which case you may decide you want a better go-to defensive load, but also the option for green tip that shoots in the same place. Same point of aim, same point of impact, same grain weight, all that stuff. So let's see what options we have. Looks like Federal makes a fusion round. It looks like a soft point, 62 grain bonded. So that's pretty cool. Also Hornady Black. This is a 223 62 grain, so you get some options there. There's a Remington Ultimate Defense 62 grain bonded. And going back to the Spear Gold Dot. Spear Gold Dot makes a 62 grain 223 Spear Gold Dot bonded soft point. And I shouldn't just throw out the term bonded in case you don't know what it means, but it's generally a way, either mechanical bonding or chemical bonding, that they fuse the jacket to the core. Because especially on high velocity rounds like the 223, you can get some of that separation. And in general, especially with a smaller caliber like this, I think, and a lot of other people think, that you want that bullet to stay together. So a lot of these, what I would call better loads, you'll see bonded. But I think any of those loads, assuming they shoot well in your gun, and guns are individualistic, kind of they have their own little shooting patterns. Your gun likes one of those loads, and you can find a good 62 grain practice load, even M855 is not crazy expensive, then you might see one of those as a better option. Now, talking about the bonded bullet and integrity, you know, there's other guns chambered in 223 than just AR-15s and M4 carbines and M-forgery type guns, right? And it's used for a lot of other applications. Even you can get and build an AR that's tailor-made for other things. So let's talk about when you wouldn't want a bonded bullet. Let's jump to the complete other end of the spectrum. When you want a bullet that just breaks apart super fast. Varmint hunting. It's one of the things the 223 does great. And I used to have a super accurate, really nice old Tang safety Ruger M77. Bull barrel, crazy accurate, 22-250. Is a good gun. I reloaded for it, but I sold it because even with reloading, which cuts down the cost quite a bit, still, why wouldn't I just use 223? Now, you can make the case if you were doing a lot of exclusive coyote hunting at extended ranges, there's an advantage to the 22-250, and I would agree there is. It's a more powerful cartridge, but I was mostly shooting prairie dogs. And a prairie dog, it's overkill with either one. You mostly have that power so you can have the flat trajectory. Either one of those is going to slam a prairie dog. But when you're shooting a prairie dog or something like it, a groundhog, a ground squirrel, a whistle pig, whatever type of varmint in that kind of size range, a woodchuck, a rock chuck, a marmot, you want that bullet to break apart fast because you're talking about from the front side to the back side of that target, you might be an inch or less, or 2 inches, right? That's not a lot. You want that bullet to dissipate quickly. So for this, varmint bullets are really good. One of my favorite go-tos was the varmint grenade. Now, I used to hand load for these, but you can get them in a factory load, and they're aptly named. They are like a grenade when they hit a varmint. So if that's what you're into, if you are trying to eradicate prairie dogs, to knock down the bubonic plague, or to help out a rancher, take care of his cattle, get a damage stamp, it can be, quite an enjoyable hunt. But anyway, varmint grenades. You may want that kind of bullet. And varmint grenade is one of the best ones I've ever used. And you're talking a lighter bullet, so you're talking even crazier velocity. You're talking 3750. Hornady also loads a Superformance round. And 35 grain, they advertise at 4,000 feet a second. Now, kind of the big claim to fame for the 22-250 for varmint hunting, you don't know, is like 40 grain at 4,000. Yeah, you're giving up a little bit of bullet weight, but if you're, again, talking about the smaller varmints, like woodchucks, rockchucks, prairie dogs, does it really matter if it's a 35 or a 40 grain bullet? With this, you're getting a 223, 35 grain at 4,000 feet a second in the Superformance. That is cooking. If you want to step up to a little bit heavier bullet, the 40 grain, which is still quite a bit lighter than the 55 grain, so you're getting higher velocities, you're getting that characteristic, then there is a Fiocchi load, Nosler, Winchester, Sig Sauer, and maybe some others. So you get some options in the 40 grain, and that's still pretty light, fast. And for a long time, the 52 and 53 grain Hornady kind of VMAX loads, those have a good reputation as well. If you're, let's say you have a Mini 14, a ranch rifle, or N.R.A that you're using as a ranch rifle for prairie dogs, jackrabbits, coyotes, fox, things like that, one of those kind of loads that shoots well out of your gun really might be the ticket for you. Now, deer hunting with a 223 is a thing, right? It is a thing. I'm not going to deny that it's a thing. I've seen it. I've been a professional big game hunter and guide. If I was professionally guiding and somebody said they were going to bring a 223, I would say, do you have anything else? They were just set on hunting with the 223 for deer. I would say, okay, my number one recommendation is going to be a solid copper bullet. Mostly a Barnes TSX or TTSX. Copper bullets, I've said this before, they're not just for hippies hunting in hemp hoodies in California. They're really, really good. I'm not for legislation mandating copper bullets. But legislation aside, all copper bullets have some real distinct advantages. They also have some really, really distinct advantages when you go light in caliber. And I think 223 for deer is pretty light in caliber. If you're looking at hunting deer with a 223, copper bullets kind of play by different rules. They tend to be light because obviously copper is lighter than lead, but they tend to hold their integrity really, really well. So you get that energy up a little bit, but you also, although they may be light or lighter, they may have respectable velocities, but they're not going to blow apart like a varmint bullet will. I really like the all copper bullets. Of those, kind of the king is the TSX or the TTSX. One is just tipped. Triple shock. Barnes kind of, as of right now, there are some other companies, especially in the bigger calibers, but Barnes is kind of known for making really good copper bullets. And I'm not sponsored by Hornady or Barnes. I'm just telling you what I know from decades of experience, what I like, what I think works well. And the Barnes TSX is a bullet. Now, Barnes does load for those. I see a 55 grain load right now I'm looking at. There's also Federal Premium that loads the 55 grain Barnes TSX. I see Black Hills loads a 62 grain. Barnes loads a 70 grain, and Barnes loads a 62 grain. So any of these would be a top choice for me in the 223. Again, they play by a little bit different rules than lead cup and core bullets. Now, these are fantastic terminal performers. Why wouldn't I recommend them for tactical use, for defensive use? Well, I think I absolutely would from a ballistic standpoint. However, again, they play by different rules. They're different lengths than a similar lead cup and core bullet. It's very unlikely, unless it's just some kind of strange happenstance, that it's going to shoot the same point of impact for you for your practice rounds. And unless you're just making it rain with your ammo budget and you can afford to do a lot of high volume practice with this premium rounds, I'd say if that's the case, yeah, then go for it. If that's the case and you're really not worried about round per round, I'd say really kind of look at going up to the 308. But if you want to stick with 223, these absolutely are great terminal performance. But again, kind of cost prohibitive, and they play by different rules. I would be surprised if they shot same point of aim, point of impact as your practice rounds. But for hunting where you're going to zero with your hunting ammo and you're going to get it zero and you're going to shoot, however many animals, if you're talking about deer, I think it's worth the $1 or $2 per round. Ideally, you're going to use one per animal. So of all the money you're going to spend hunting on gas and on tags and maybe travel and all that stuff, the $1 or $2 per round, really, ammunition is a good place to spend it. So I think the solid copper rounds for medium-sized game hunting, whitetail, mule deer, pronghorn, again, it wouldn't be my first caliber choice. But if you're going to choose it, at least choose the best you can get. And I think for the medium game, for right now, the solid copper bullets are the best you're going to get. And I guess we should talk about, if you want to stick with like a military proven round with street cred, there is the Mark 262, the Black Hills military contract 77 grain open tip match ammunition. It has a good reputation. It has a good reputation. It was developed for some of the perceived, I'm not going to get into whether they're valid or not, but perceived shortcomings of the 5.56 223. And 77 grain, you're moving up quite a bit from the original, 55 grain. It's at roughly 50% more than the original weight of the 55 grain. It has some real advantages. It's also expensive. So if you're looking for that, you kind of run into that same problem. Is it better ballistically, I think, than the 55 grain or the 62 grain? Yeah, I think it probably is. It's also much more expensive. So again, if you're doing that, are you practicing with that ammo? And in general, again, unless some weird happenstance, is it going to shoot the same as that 55 grain white box you bought at Walmart? I don't know about that. And I don't care how good your round is ballistically, you have to hit your target. So unless, again, it's some weird coincidence where they shoot the same point of aim, point of impact, in your rifle when fired by you, are you going to go out and practice with 55 grain and then re-zero your rifle every single time you go and load it up and leave the range for your truck gun, for your home defense gun? I don't know how likely that is. I guess some other creative solutions would be if you had two pretty close to identical as far as training goes, let's say M forgeries. Let's say you got your more affordable but still good, dependable carbine that you go out and train with, but you have your go-to home defense or truck gun, which is similar enough that training is the same. You've got the same optic on it. It's got the same controls. Maybe that one stays loaded with Mark 262 or stays loaded with solid coppers or stays loaded with the Spirit Gold Dot, and you have your training one. Roll zeroed for 50 yards. Can't necessarily change the ammo out of one out of the other, but your premium one, your Daniel Defense, your Colt is your defensive carbine, and your other one is your practice gun. I don't know that that is the best solution, but it is a viable solution if you want high volume, cheap ammo practice kind of setup, and you still want a good defensive option, and you don't want to have to re-zero your rifle every time you leave the range, because although you should, are you really going to? And then you're stuck with the quandary, do you just go with the full metal jacket that you know you're going to zeroed for? because you're better off hitting with a ballistically inferior round than missing with a really good ballistic round that you don't hit with because it's not zeroed to where you're aiming. But pure ballistics, there is, I think, a lot of other options. So don't think that because the main go-tos are the xm193 and the M855, that those are necessarily the best rounds for you. I would say in a civilian context, most of the time, they're probably not. And if you just have a blue sky ammo budget, or one of the 3-letter government agencies or Uncle Sam is buying your ammo for you, then yeah, that's great. But for most people, I think it's going to be cost prohibitive to practice with the Mark 262 or with the Barnes TSX. Right? You're likely not buying cases of that stuff to practice with, unless, again, you just have a blue sky ammo budget, which is awesome if you do. I have to think for most people that's not the case. So I think for most people, the best thing to do is either pick 55 grain or 62 grain, find a good affordable training round, and then find a good ballistic match to it that does shoot same point of aim, point of impact for you. And maybe you have some different color magazines, or just put some tape on your magazines. Or, red or orange tape means training. So if you drop them, which you probably will if you're training hard, that you can find them again out in the desert or in the grass or the forest or the swamp or wherever you're training. And then your just standard mags or for your defensive loadout. I think that's a pretty good solution for most people. What I don't advise doing is going and just shooting the cheap 55 grain stuff and then loading up 77 grain because everybody says it's the best online, and it shoots nowhere near where you're aiming because you haven't tested it, you haven't trained with it. You have to zero your gun for that specific load. And you also have to make sure, not just assume, that it's going to be reliable with that ammo when fired by you in your gun. Not by somebody on YouTube and their gun, but you. Anyway, those are some thoughts on kind of going beyond the 193 and the M855. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I get that this episode was a little bit nerdy, a little bit caliber specific, but hopefully you found it useful. There are a lot of people that run the 223, the 556. So hopefully this was useful. If you thought this or any other episode was worth $1, consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. You can sign up for $1. You can sign up for more, but if you want to just sign up for $1, you can do that too. Anyway, there should be a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical tip of the day. You may have been taught not to put your magazine down on the ground. I'm going to tell you absolutely do that. There was a time when that was taught. I'm not sure why, but especially with the AR-15 type platform, M4 type platform, M16, you shove that magazine hard on the ground and use it as like a monopod to shoot more steadily with, and you have a malfunction, likely there's something wrong with the magazine. Maybe less likely wrong with the rifle, but a good gun and magazine, a good carbine and magazine combination, you should be able to shove that magazine hard down into the ground. And especially for like if you're on a perimeter, you're just in a position for a long time in the prone, it can really be nice for a good steady position in the long term to have that magazine resting on the ground. So if you've ever been told that you're not supposed to do that, I would say that's largely a myth. Unless there's something really wrong with the magazine, like it's an old metal GI magazine and maybe that magazine catch cutout is worn and prolonged or something like that, elongated, that's a better word, elongated, and it has some kind of feeding issue. But again, with a good carbine magazine setup like a Magpul mag or something like that, it should be no issue at all. And it can have a lot of benefits. So don't be shy about throwing that magazine hard down on the ground and monopoding with it, kind of resting that rifle on the magazine. Your tactical verse of the day. It is written, He gives us all things richly to enjoy. He gives us all things richly to enjoy. God does. Everything good comes from God. If you're like me, you enjoy shooting. You enjoy guns. You enjoy ammunition. You enjoy going out to the range and shooting. And it's good to enjoy the good things that God has given us. But let us remember the giver of all good things. That's God. That's so much more important in life. God and a relationship with God and remembering and thanking God. That's so much more important than the guns and the ammo and the body armor and the tactical kit and the fighting knives. God is more important, because one day all that stuff will be stripped away. And there you'll be. Every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. Remember, men, what's really important. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.